His voice came through low and tight, disappointment tucked behind each word. "You're really not making it back on time. Maya, babe." He paused on babe, like the habit didn't fit anymore. I stood at the window of a hotel in Eastview, Georgia, watching the unfamiliar skyline fade into dusk. Behind me, my suitcase lay open on the bed. A neat stack of blouses, conference folders, and a flash of obsidian velvet I'd hidden beneath everything else. "I know. I'm sorry," I said, keeping my tone soft. "They stretched the summit at the last minute. The keynote got bumped. I won't be home until late Sunday, maybe Monday morning." Silence. I pictured Jamal in our kitchen, leaning against the counter in that black hoodie with the frayed cuffs, the one I loved on him. I could almost hear the faint clink of his ring on a ceramic mug. "That's rough," he said at last. "Halloween won't hit the same without you." I smiled into the phone, even as my stomach tightened. "I know. I wanted to be there. I even packed my costume." "What costume?" "Too quick. The Midnight Sorceress, the one with the silver filigree," I said. "Remember?" "Beep. Oh, right. That one." The hesitation was paper-thin, but it cut. Something in his voice felt off, like a note struck just shy of true. "You good?" "Yes. Yeah. Work's wild. And the neighborhood's doing the most this year. I might swing by the Jacksons' party for a bit. Keep up appearances." "Do it," I said with a light laugh. "Just save me some candy." He chuckled hollow. "I wish you were coming home." "Me too," I whispered. We said goodbye. I held the phone to my ear long after the line died, listening to the quiet. Then I set it down. What Jamal didn't know, I'd already paid the change fee and moved my flight. I was headed home that evening. The extension was cover. I wanted to surprise him. I pictured stepping through the back gate mid-party, laughing as he turned, stunned, thrilled. Neighbors cheering. Someone making a toast. A memory that felt like a scene from a movie. It was a night to remember, just not the way I imagined. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, I turned onto our street. Jack-o'-lanterns grinned from stoops, their candlelight jittering in the October air. Kids in tiny masks sprinted across lawns with plastic buckets swinging. The breeze smelled like wood smoke and caramel. I parked 2 blocks away so he wouldn't spot my car. The tote strap cut a line across my shoulder as I stepped out, costume folded neatly inside. The velvet felt heavy with intention. Music and laughter grew louder as I neared the backyard. Orange lanterns hung between trees, washing the lawn in warm glow. A fog machine sighed near the hedges. A silly inflatable bat bobbed and nodded like it was in on the joke. It looked like a glossy mag spread. Suburban enchantment. I crouched behind the tall hedge that separated our place from the Jacksons. The fire pit popped in the center of the yard. People drifted with red cups, parents in elaborate get-ups talking while kids hooped and chased neon bracelets. My pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. I was seconds from slipping into the garage, changing fast, and reappearing as the surprise. Then I saw her. At first I thought the shadows were lying. She stood near the firelight, her face carved by flicker and glow. Obsidian velvet gown, silver web trim, a brimmed hat tilted just so. She laughed, tossing a cascade of dark curls over her shoulder, resting her hand on a man's arm. My husband's arm. I went still. It wasn't similar. It was the same look I'd shown him 2 weeks ago, the custom order I'd described down to the stitching. The choker at her throat matched the one I'd tucked into my bag. Jamal leaned toward her, his body curving into hers with a kind of ease I hadn't seen in months. She touched his chest. He didn't move away. Air left my lungs. They moved through the crowd like a pair everyone already accepted. A neighbor in a cardboard robot suit gave them a playful thumbs up. Someone in fairy wings clapped and called out about best duo. No heads turned because there was nothing to question. She wasn't dressed like me. She was dressed as me. Behind the hedge, I watched my world tilt. The impulse to storm in flared, tear off the hat, demand an answer, crush the moment under the weight of truth. But I didn't move. I stayed in the shadow, silent and unseen, while the man I loved paraded with another woman wearing the fantasy I'd planned to bring home. Something inside me didn't shatter. It steadied. I eased back from the hedge and slid along the fence, a ghost with a heartbeat. I wouldn't confront him. Not tonight. If he wanted to play make-believe on Halloween, then he'd invited the wrong woman to the game. I stepped into the backyard as if I'd been there all along, just another costumed guest arriving late. A pirate captain bragged about his candy haul. A zombie bride staged a dramatic swoon. Kids zigzagged between grown folks arguing over the last slice of pumpkin pie. I hugged my tote to my chest and scanned until I found them again. Jamal leaning on the grill, the woman laughing, her dress hitched exactly like mine would be, a matching deep crimson scarf draped at both their throats. That was when the dread settled into certainty. This wasn't a coincidence. It was choreography. I drifted closer, careful to keep to the edges. Their voices threaded through the music. "So glad you came," she said, her fingers sliding over his. He squeezed back. "I'm glad I did too," he murmured. I pressed against a wooden post, letting the cool grain anchor me. As the shock iced over, my focus sharpened. Nearby, Rochelle, my best friend from college, stood in a silk headscarf and bangles, playing fortune teller, waving people over to read their future. I slipped beside her and whispered, "Everything looks amazing. Mind if I jump in later?" She studied my face, sensing a shift, then nodded. "Whenever you're ready." While she launched into a playful palm reading to distract an eager neighbor, I slid toward the drink coolers, lifted a can as cover, and slipped back into the shadows along the yard's perimeter. The string lights hummed above. I reached the garden bench, our bench, the place where Jamal had proposed 3 Halloweens ago. I sat, unzipped my tote and pulled out my phone. 2 words, typed into a new note. Later proof. I lifted the camera, zoomed, and caught a frame across the lawn. His fingers laced with hers, both of them laughing at something only they could hear. Saved the photo. My thumb hovered over delete, then moved away. Not for drama, for documentation. Inside, the party swelled around me, warm and loud. But I was elsewhere now. Calm, precise, awake. I slipped deeper into the glow like a late guest who belonged. Laughter rose and fell in waves. The DJ cued throwback tracks that shook loose a few aunties in sequined capes. I let the noise fold over me until my breathing matched its rhythm. Jamal and the woman, Betrayal I learned from a passing greeting, stood angled toward each other as if the party orbited them. Every now and then he glanced around, a quick sweep that never landed on me for long. I moved as a shadow does. Present, unnoticed. At the snack table, I filled a flimsy cup and drifted to the jack-o'-lantern display where a trio debated which carving deserved scariest. I tilted my cup and murmured to one of them, "Saw those 2 by the back fence earlier. Looked like they were practicing for a movie scene." A raised brow, a quiet "oh." I didn't add more. I floated away, letting curiosity do the rest. Across the lawn, Rochelle caught my eye. She gave a tiny nod, the kind you send a friend when you recognize the storm forming inside her. I nodded back. "Not yet," my look said. "Not here." Jamal finally broke from Betrayal and came toward me, cautious smile in place. "You made it," he said, voice low. "You look incredible." "Thank you," I replied, cool as glass. "I wanted to surprise you." He searched my face, then let out a short laugh that wasn't joy. "Didn't think you'd be here." "Neither did I," I said, and turned before the moment could pretend to be tender. Betrayal approached with the kind of confidence that comes from believing you've already won. "Y'all are flawless," she said, including me with a bright, practiced grin. "Wild we matched this hard." "Yes," I answered, letting my smile carry frost. "Wild." I excused myself before the air could congeal and slipped inside the house. The entryway smelled faintly of cinnamon and the eucalyptus oil I kept by the sink. Familiar. In the living room, I set my tote on the couch and opened my phone. The photos I'd taken glowed back at me. His hand at the small of her back, her mouth near his ear, their scarves brushing. Evidence isn't an explosion. It's a key you save for the right lock. I glanced toward the hallway. Our shared laptop sat on the desk in the den, lid cracked open from when he'd cued the playlist earlier. I touched the trackpad. The screen sprang to life. Calendar, email, a folder labeled Travel Q4. Inside, one recurring block hid under a bland name. Vendor dinner. Tuesday nights. Familiar restaurant. I snapped screenshots. Date stamps crisp and cold. Not tonight's impulse, then. Schedule. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the dark screen. Obsidian velvet, silver trim, the hat's brim like a blade. I thought of the bench outside, of the proposal under the same strings of light, of how easy it is to confuse tradition with truth. Back in the kitchen I poured water, swallowed calm, and slid out the side door. The party had shifted into its middle act, the one where the kids were sticky and tired and the adults had traded punch for stories. I rejoined the flow. Jamal's gaze clipped me again. He started toward me, then stopped when Betrayal touched his sleeve. The contact was light, nothing scandalous. But there are ways to say mine without moving your mouth. I moved through clusters of neighbors, a polite laugh here, a compliment on a costume there, always keeping them in my peripheral vision. When someone asked where I'd found my hat, I said, a little inspiration from home, and let the joke land where it wanted. By the time the host called for a quick intermission, photos later, contest soon, the night had sharpened into what it really was, a stage. I wasn't the audience anymore. Near the patio, I slipped behind the shed and changed the angle on a small digital camera I'd tucked into a planter earlier, its lens facing the garden bench. I checked the timestamp, set the interval capture, and reseated it. Not dramatic. Documented. I straightened, brushed a leaf from my sleeve, and looked back at the lawn. Jamal had his arm braced on the grill again. Betrayal leaned in, her laugh bubbling up as if she'd never learned to be careful. A neighbor in a robe and rollers costume sailed past me and whispered, "Y'all twins tonight," with a wink. "Something like that," I said. When I stepped into the glow of the lanterns again, the decision settled inside me with the weight of certainty. I would not shout. I would not perform pain for people who'd forget by morning. I would rearrange the scene so that, when the lights came up, the story stood on its own. The DJ eased into a smoother track. The host announced the adult showcase would start soon. "Line up, witches and warlocks, let us see the drip." People hooped and gathered near the maple tree strung with paper bats. I took my place at the end of the line, calm and precise. Rochelle drifted to my shoulder and squeezed my hand once. "You good?" "I'm ready," I said and meant it. From across the lawn, Jamal finally looked at me without looking away. He recognized something in my posture, something that told him the temperature had changed. He started forward. I smiled, not sweet, not cruel, certain. Let the night proceed. I had my blueprint. The host's voice boomed through the backyard speakers. "All right, y'all. It's time for the big reveal. Costume contest lineup." Neighbors cheered and clapped, phones flashing under the orange lanterns. I adjusted my hat and joined the slow procession of characters. Vampires, pirates, fairies, and me, the second midnight sorceress. As I stepped forward, heads turned. Whispers sparked like dry leaves catching flame. Even the host blinked twice, confused, glancing between me and Betrayal. The resemblance was uncanny. The same velvet, the same silver lace, except I wore the truth and she wore imitation. Clipboard judge leaned close. "Where did you get that hat?" Smiled. "A little inspiration from home." Laughter rippled through the crowd, but Jamal's face froze. He stood behind the snack table next to Betrayal, pretending to laugh along, yet his eyes never left mine. They looked like a couple, too easy together, too polished. I let the silence between us hum. I drifted through the crowd, stopping at the punch bowl, pouring myself a drink while pretending to mingle. At the corner of my eye, I could feel the murmur spreading, soft as smoke. "Did you see? There are two of them. She came dressed the same." Let them talk. A neighbor in a cat mask whispered, "That's wild, girl. Isn't it?" I said lightly, sipping the punch. I caught Jamal's glance again. He crossed the lawn, voice lowered. You made it. You look amazing. I finished for him. He nodded, smiling weakly. I wanted to surprise you, I said, calm, every word measured. He swallowed. Didn't think you'd be here. Neither did I replied softly, then turned toward the fire pit before he could answer. A few feet away, Betrayal joined us, smiling with that perfect party face. You two look incredible. What are the odds we'd wear the same thing? Seems like you were inspired by the right person, I said, my tone even, the edges sharpened. Her smile faltered, only for a blink. It's just a coincidence. Of course, I replied smoothly. Funny how those happen. Then I walked away. Inside the house I found stillness. The laughter from the yard softened through the walls. I opened my phone again. The photo I'd taken glowed on the screen. His hand on her back, both laughing, the firelight flickering on their faces. I backed it up to my email. A stray thought led me to his laptop again. One search. Calendar. A folder labeled Business Dinners. Inside. Appointments every other Friday with initials that weren't mine. I took screenshots. Quiet theft of truth. The betrayal wasn't new. It was rehearsed. Back outside, I stood by the maple tree where we'd once taken couple photos for the neighborhood newsletter. I could almost hear the camera shutter, the sound of a love I used to trust. Now I wasn't shaking. I was deliberate. The crowd grew louder as the contest judges tallied votes. Jamal hovered beside Betrayal again, her laughter carrying across the yard. A couple in matching skeleton suits danced near the fire pit. Rochelle appeared beside me, eyes wide. You all right? I'm done being quiet, I said. When the host announced, Best Costume, Midnight Sorceress and her partner. The applause erupted. Betrayal squealed, hugging Jamal. The trophy ribbon gleamed gold between them. My throat tightened, but I didn't move. I just clapped, slowly, rhythmically, until the sound caught attention. Jamal's gaze flickered toward me. Betrayal shifted, uncomfortable. I smiled like a queen blessing her subjects. Then I turned away. I slipped through the garage, where the night air felt cold and clean. On the workbench sat the backup ribbon I'd made weeks ago, a playful project that now felt prophetic. I swapped it for the one she'd won, sliding mine into the prize box before locking it again. It read, Most Authentic Costume, You and I. I tucked the original ribbon into my bag. Inside, the crowd began to fade, music mellowing, laughter thinning as people said their goodbyes. The clock crept toward midnight. My pulse was steady. When Jamal walked me to the car, Betrayal followed halfway down the path. Neither of them said a word. I turned once at the curb and said quietly, Thanks for tonight. It was unforgettable. He opened his mouth to speak, but I gently closed the passenger door in his face. His reflection stared back at me in the windshield. Drive safe, I said softly. Then I pulled away, past the glowing pumpkins, past the laughter dimming behind me, leaving them framed in orange light, still playing their parts in a story that had already changed. By the time I reached the highway, the party lights were only specks in my rearview mirror. My hands rested steady on the wheel. No trembling, no tears. Just the low hum of the engine and the kind of silence that comes when your heart finally catches up to the truth. I drove aimlessly for a while, past the empty diners and gas stations on the edge of town, before pulling into a rest stop. I parked beneath a broken street lamp, opened my laptop, and connected the digital camera. Each photo loaded like a slow confession. Jamal and Betrayal laughing near the fire pit, her hand grazing his arm curving protectively around her waist. Evidence crystal clear. I copied everything onto a USB drive labeled Halloween Surprise. Then I sat back, staring at the screen's glow, feeling that strange calm again. Not forgiveness, not fury, but control. By the time I returned home, it was well past 1 in the morning. The house was dark except for the faint flicker of the porch light. I kicked off my heels, washed my face, and crawled into bed still wearing the costume. The velvet no longer felt like magic, it felt like armor. When Jamal came in, the lock clicked softly. I heard the slow drag of his footsteps down the hallway, the faint scent of cheap cologne and someone else's perfume. I didn't move. "Oh, you're awake," he said quietly, surprised. "Barely," I answered. "Conference got cancelled. I decided to come home early." He froze in the doorway, guilt flashing across his face like headlights on glass. "You came home." "I did," I said, sitting up. "Had a change of plans." He tried to smile, but his lips twitched. "The party was nice. You should have seen." "I did," I interrupted. "I saw everything." He blinked, confused, and I stood, crossing the room. The air between us thickened. I reached into my bag and set the USB drive on his nightstand beside a small printed stack of photos. "Your Halloween surprise," I said softly. He looked down, recognizing the images. His mouth opened, then closed again. On the coffee table in the living room, the replacement ribbon lay waiting. "Most authentic costume, you and I." The gold lettering glinted beneath the lamp. I picked it up, carried it back into the bedroom, and held it up for him to see. "You know," I said evenly, "when I made this, I thought it would be something sweet. Something we'd laugh about." He swallowed hard. "Maya." "Don't," I said, cutting him off. "I'm tired of speeches." I placed the ribbon beside the photos and went to the drawer by the hallway. From it, I pulled out our marriage certificate and laid it next to the pile. Evidence, memory, history. Then I turned to him. "I'm taking a few days away next week," I said calmly. "To think. Don't call me. Don't text. When I get back we'll talk, if I still want to." He stared at me, eyes wide, voice small. "You're leaving." "I'm reclaiming my space," I corrected. "There's a difference." I climbed back into bed, pulling the covers up to my chest. "Good night, Jamal." The room was quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees outside. Closed my eyes. He stood there for a long time before finally lowering himself into the chair across the room. Neither of us spoke again, but I could feel it, the shift. The silence no longer belonged to him. It was mine. When I woke up, the light had changed. The soft gray of dawn poured across the room like something reborn, clean and cold. Jamal was still sitting in the chair across from the bed, shoulders slumped, eyes bloodshot from a night spent drowning in the proof I'd left him. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence told me everything. I stood, stretched slowly, then walked into the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the air. I poured myself a cup, my reflection caught in the window. Calm, centered, unfamiliar in the best way. Behind me, his voice cracked through the quiet. "Maya, please. Let me explain." I turned, leaning against the counter, my mug warm between my palms. "Explain what exactly?" The calendar reminders labeled business dinners, the matching costume, or the part where you brought her into our house. He flinched, looking down. "It wasn't supposed to." "Don't say happen," I cut in. "Things like that don't just happen. They're chosen." He rubbed his face, voice barely a whisper. "I made a mistake." "Yeah," I said. "And I made a discovery." He blinked, confused. "That night showed me who you are," I said. "But more importantly, it showed me who I've been. Someone who believed in loyalty more than in boundaries. That's changing." I placed the mug on the counter beside the stack I'd prepared earlier. The USB drive, the photos, the ribbon, and the marriage certificate. I'd arranged them neatly, like exhibits in a quiet courtroom. He stared at the evidence, shaking his head slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I do know what I'm not going to do, and that's shrink myself trying to understand a man who already decided to forget me." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. I could see the fight draining out of him, replaced by the slow ache of realization. I moved toward the hallway, grabbed my duffel bag and slung it over my shoulder. "I'm going to my sister's for a few days. I'll call when I'm ready." He nodded, still staring at the pile on the counter. Maya, please. I stopped at the door. Don't beg. It's unbecoming. For a heartbeat, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I stepped outside. The air was cool, crisp, carrying the faint scent of pumpkins from last night's party. The neighborhood was quiet now. No laughter, no glowing lanterns, just wind and sunlight cutting through the leftover cobweb decorations. I stood by my car and looked back at the house that used to feel like home. The curtains fluttered slightly, and I caught a glimpse of Jamal moving through the kitchen, lost in his own ghost story. I smiled faintly. Happy Halloween, I whispered under my breath. Then I got in the car, turned on the ignition, and drove away. The road stretched ahead, wide and golden with morning light. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of pretending. My chest rose steady, unhurried. The costume, the lies, the evidence, all behind me now. Revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't been cruel. Had been clear. He'd wake later that day and find every photo, every timestamp, every echo of what he'd done waiting for him. He'd know exactly when the switch flipped, when the woman he underestimated decided to write her own ending. And me. I'd already started. Because that Halloween wasn't about loss anymore. It was about transformation. The night he thought he'd fooled me was the night I finally saw myself. Not as the ghost he made me, but as the flame that refused to go out.